Welcome back to another episode of the Startup Therapy Podcast. This is Ryan Rutan, joined as always by my friend, founder, and CEO of startups.com, Wil Schroeder. Wil, as founders, we spend a lot of time beating ourselves up over the quality of our ideas, right? Particularly at that really, really early stage where we've just come up with the idea, we're trying to get onto something new, and it's that really early kind of raw clay stage. And we spend a lot of times really, really beating ourselves up over our own feedback on the idea, over other people's feedback on the idea. How many companies, big companies, like well-known companies, can you name that started off as great ideas?
None of them. They're all
So I
dumb
thought,
ideas, right?
yeah,
Let's
yep,
go through the list. Let's go through the list of how many dumb ideas started off. And ludicrous at the time, what's so funny is people have revisionist history, right? Like
sure,
now they look back and say, well, that makes complete sense. Uber made
total
complete
sense,
sense. No, it
right?
didn't. I
No,
remember when Travis was running around LA trying to talk to folks like Jason Calacanis, who famously invested, and people are like, wait,
yeah,
what? You're gonna
yeah,
have strangers get in other people's cars, and that's just gonna work
right,
out okay? You're nuts,
yeah.
right?
Doesn't sound like a good idea, right?
Or I'll give my feedback. Mid-90s, eBay. So let me get this
Yeah,
straight. Anyone that takes a picture or downloads a picture of a Rolex watch can say that they own a Rolex watch and will
yeah,
get money for it, and it may or may
right,
not show up at somebody's house. That is a
yep.
terrible idea. Yeah,
Yeah.
kind of
Ends
worked
well for
out.
eBay and PayPal, right? But is this going to work for anybody else? Didn't seem so at the time,
Yeah,
right?
the list goes on. Airbnb.
Yeah.
So let me get this
Right.
straight.
Right.
You're gonna let people rent out spare rooms in their house. How
Yeah.
long before somebody winds up dead, right? In an Airbnb, like a week, right? That sounds like
Right.
that would never possibly work.
One
Um,
of the US's most famous serial killers ran a rooming house, right? Like that was where most of our victims came from, right?
this is
Like
such a
there
bad
was a lot of
idea,
evidence it was a bad idea, right?
right? Or things that weren't a bad idea, they just weren't like a great idea, like
Sure.
Facebook
Sure.
being a yearbook app for Harvard, right? Like
Right.
that doesn't sound like the
Pretty
social
limited
network
audience.
that's going to change everything, right?
Yeah.
And yet it is. I think the problem that we have as founders, especially for founders who haven't done this before,
Yeah.
which is most of them,
Right.
is
Why
that
would you have?
right? Why would you have? We're at a point where we think because we imagine this actually isn't true. We think that we have to have this genius idea because
Yeah.
we think Airbnb or Uber or Facebook or even eBay back in the day was the idea today that it was back then, that they had
Yeah.
this
Just
vision for it. I always
absolute
tell
fallacy.
people we're using Google version 1000 at this point.
Right.
Right? Google was
It's
nothing
absolutely
like it
true.
was, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
When they put it together. And if you do a little bit of your homework on that one, you'll find out that the Google guys were looking to sell all of Google back in the day to Excite, which doesn't even
Yep.
exist anymore, for
Right.
$1 million. That's how confident they were that Google was going to be the juggernaut that it is today, right?
How excited do you
Revisionist
think
history.
Excite is that they missed that one, right?
Oh my god, right? I mean,
Although
colossal.
arguably under their guidance, we may not have ended up with version 1000 of Google. So who knows what we'd be doing right
Yeah,
now?
who knows? But look,
Right.
today let's talk about how ludicrous this idea that I have to have a great idea in order to build a startup is. And let's also more importantly talk about why it's ludicrous. Like
Yeah.
what actually happens? How do dumb ideas go on to become great ideas? And what is that process? Kind of dig into that a little bit. All right, so before we get into this next topic, I just want to let you know what we talk about here is like 1% of the conversation. Really, this conversation is going on all day long online at groups.startups.com, where Ryan and I pretty much talk endlessly with founders about every one of these topics. So if by the end of this discussion, you like the topic and you want to dig into it a little bit more with Ryan and I, just head to groups.startups.com and we'll pick it up from there.
Sure. No, I think that's perfect. I sort of see two major flavors of this, where there's startup founders get stuck on this idea that like my idea needs to be better, and there's sort of two major versions of this that I see. The one is I'm just going to keep thinking and iterating until I have the final great idea, and then there's the founder who does recognize that like what it is today isn't what it's going to be 10 years from now, but they end up stuck in the same problem, which is that they want to figure out what that end point looks like. They want
Right.
the 10 years down the road version before they start. Now they're like, I need to know where I'm going. I have to have my North Star. I have to have my this, which like I agree with all that stuff.
Right.
It'd be nice to have, but let's be realistic about how far we can push that before we actually start, right? Because I think that's we can talk about what we think the major pain points around this are, but you and I have talked about this for sure. We hate to see founders not start because of this, and that happens all the time, right? That's the issue. If you never actually start moving forward, the idea is never going to change enough or in the right ways to actually get you where you want to go. So you're actually, it's counterintuitive, but by starting off with a dumb idea, you iterate and you get there faster, right? If you if you're like, I'm just going to keep thinking and I'll wait to start until I've got the right one that'll catch in the market and we'll move forward, you never end up starting and you never end up polishing the stone, and you're just stuck with what you've got. And it never goes anywhere. And to me, like that's the saddest thing, is that dumb ideas die on the vine. They could have grown into something really cool.
You bet. And so imagine if all of those founders of all those companies we just listed failed to start because they looked at the idea in its current form. Everybody gave them terrible feedback, which, by the way, some dumb ideas are just dumb ideas. Right?
Some dumb ideas are dumb ideas, right?
Right. But what's missing there, ideas are a process. Ideas are not a final step, right? We don't just have the brilliant idea at the start. We have the formation of an idea. And that idea will change 1,000 times, like every major company ever has, until it becomes the great idea that it'll be. I think part of this, and I'll just kind of add this as well, we also assume that the great idea must also have a great founder. We always forget that many of the founders that we're talking about were like in study hall in high school a few years before they started these companies. They were by no means qualified. Dumb idea, totally unqualified founder for the biggest companies out there today. And so if you can't see a pattern here, you're overlooking how ideas actually develop. Ideas develop as a process. We have the start of an idea, and we say to ourselves, I can't possibly know where this is going to wind up. I can't possibly know how many trips of fate that it's going to take in order for me to get to where I need to be. But I know that I have to start the ball rolling. If I fail to start, I'll never end. It's kind of that simple.
Right. That's the first failure, right? And it's the one that dooms the startup to ultimate failure, is just simply not starting, right? Nobody can say right from the beginning. Again, some ideas are just dumb ideas, but even those need to take a couple steps before they trip, falter, and fail, right? Because we've seen this, and again, like, because you don't know how things are going to evolve, right? Sometimes it's the idea that needs to evolve. Sometimes it's the market at large that needs to evolve, or some piece of infrastructure. Like if we look at Netflix as an example, right, where they're like, okay, we're going to ship people DVDs by mail. Ultimately, that wasn't what they became, but they couldn't become a streaming service because at the time, the proliferation of bandwidth, broadband internet wasn't fully there yet. Not everybody was on it, so streaming just wasn't possible for a vast majority, and it was too much of a leap in change in behavior. People were used to DVDs; it's what they wanted. It was higher quality, so you had, some of the video files wouldn't have accepted the streaming anyways. But that was out of their hands, right? They needed broadband to catch up with them. They needed streaming technology to catch up with them before they could do that. Were they thinking about it at the time? I'll never know, right? Maybe they've talked about that somewhere. I've never seen it, but that idea evolved as the market evolved. If they had just said, like, you know what, mailing people DVDs is not the long-term business we want to be in. It doesn't make any sense. We're not going to start because we can't ship it via the internet. We can't get it to people instantly like we really want to. So let's just not do it. It doesn't make any sense. We're just making this incrementally better. So let's just not do it. Right. That would have been a huge miss on their part. Been a huge failure.
Huge.
And I'd have to drive to video stores still, which just seems like so ludicrous now, right? So I'm glad they stuck with it, right?
Well, Ryan, there actually was an interview. I'll never forget this. It just kind of like stuck with me. There's an interview with Reed Hastings in the very, very early days, and they said, "Why is the company called Netflix? Shouldn't you be called Mailflix?" And he said it's Netflix because the goal is to be able to deliver these over the internet.
That's right. So they did give evidence of this. I just forgot about it. Yeah.
And I'll never forget at the time, they were like, "You're out of your mind," right? And it just
Yep.
and this is like
Yeah.
99, 2000-ish, and to be
Yep.
fair, like, people still had dial-up accounts, right?
That was
So,
it, right?
the concept of being able to deliver movies anything close to what we have now was absolutely ludicrous, right? But what was interesting to me was what he was thinking was people are gonna want a on-demand way for movies. Now, right now, I gotta
Sure.
ship them through the mail. Not the coolest way to
Right.
do it, but that's what I gotta do right now. But I wanna be an on-demand service provider. When
Yep.
I say it was a dumb idea, how he was going about it, mailing DVDs, compared to what he actually wanted to do was dumb, right?
Yep.
But
But
often it's a step toward the mechanism you're actually trying to get toward. And I think
yes.
people overlook that.
By the way, I just want to mention if what we're talking about today sounds like the kind of discussion you wish you were having more often, you actually can. We're online all day, every day, working through exactly these types of topics with founders just like you. So, any question you would have, or maybe some problem you just want to work through, we're here and we love this stuff. And we're easy to find. Head over to groups.startups.com and let's just start talking.
Yeah. No, I mean, like you said, it's a problem with revisionist history, right? We look at the final product and then we start to compare our idea to the final products that we're looking at around us. And I think that's one of the biggest problems. We've talked about this before. Like, comparing your startup to another startup is a surefire way to make yourself feel worse about your startup. Right? Like, there's no better way to feel bad about yourself than to take somebody else's Instagram version of how they built their company and compare it to what you're going through. You're never going to feel good about that. Stop doing it. It doesn't make any sense. That's a dumb idea.
Right.
And that won't get better with time. If you keep doing that, you'll keep being miserable. So it's about recognizing that none of those companies started anywhere near where they were, right? And we don't need to
Right.
flog the horse here, but it is worth hammering on a bit. It didn't start that way, and in most cases, so they had the vision for delivering via the net. So they had a version of what that looked like, but they couldn't be clear on that. They certainly wouldn't have told us that by 2021 you'd be streaming 4K UHD, because that didn't even exist then, right? Like,
Exactly.
what we're doing now, we have better quality than we were getting on DVD at the time, right? Which was one of the other things that, there was one of the other the concern points, like, will we ever be able to deliver the level of quality and in a reasonable amount of time, right? If it's actually at that time, based on it was funny. I remember seeing a comparison. At some point, someone did. At the time they started mailing them, it was actually faster to mail them than to download a movie via dial-up. Right?
Yeah, I get it.
Amazing, right? So, again, like, the market matures, the idea matures, much in the same way that we grow up over time. So do our ideas, but we have to give them that time, and we have to give them the practice, right? We don't learn by just sitting around and thinking about stuff, right? We have to experience, we have to try, we have to fail, we have to be dumb, and that's how we get smarter, right? It's as simple as that.
I agree. I think people have this concept as founders. We have this concept because, again, we haven't done this before. Why would you? That ideation and the development of our company's idea is a fundamentally linear process. So here's how people think it works. Right? I have the start of a really great idea. Of course, it's small. I'm Mark Zuckerberg at Harvard, and so I'm just doing the yearbook app for now. But I'm fairly confident that this is just Gen 1, and it'll just eventually become Facebook.
Yeah.
That is not at all how it works, right? Here's how it works. I'll use our own example at startups.com.
Sure, that's a good idea.
10 years ago, we had no idea we'd be what we are today. Hell, a year ago, we didn't know we were going to be where we are today. So I just want to be very clear. And we've done this forever.
Yeah.
And so 10 years ago, we got started because we knew we wanted to work with startups for the rest of our lives, but we didn't know how to do it. And we looked at it and said, we don't want to be a venture firm, just not our style. We don't want to be a consultant. So we're trying to figure out, how do we spend time with founders all day long? At the time, crowdfunding was really starting to become a thing. It was early days, like really 2010, early. 2011. But we said, let's start there. It's not exactly all of what we want to do, but it gets us in the game. It gets us talking to founders all day.
That's it.
Exactly, right?
It gets us in the game, right? It was a hot topic at the time, so we knew we'd be able to drive interest around it. There was already interest around it. We'd just be able to capture that. And that was sort of all that mattered, right? It was like, are we going to end up in the room with the people that we want to be spending our time with, That was all that mattered to us at that point. Like, what room are
100%.
they going to? We'll follow them, right? That was sort of what we did at that point, was we followed the market and we said, where are they going to be? We'll go meet them there and we can iterate. And I don't know if you remember, but like we have some really funny old PDFs and photos of whiteboard sessions where we did do a bit of sort of product road mapping, and thinking about, what does this thing look like by the time we're done? And it's funny to look at, sort of where we were right and where we were wrong.
Right.
And there's a lot of both, right? And the point, right? You're going to draw some inferences, you're going to draw some vectors. Some of them are going to hit and some of them aren't, and that's okay. That's how you figure out what works and what doesn't. To your point, it's what got us in the game. If we had not done that, if we'd been
It
like,
did.
let's sit around and wait, let's wait a year and see if crowdfunding takes off the way we hope that it will, and then we'll jump in, we never would have jumped, because a year in, we would have been like, this isn't moving as fast as we thought. This isn't going to be the business that we wanted to build. Not worth entering, right? So
Right.
Hindsight is so clear. It's so easy to see how easy it would have been to fall off that path and to not move forward. I'm super glad that we did, but it took some vision and some luck to put us where we are.
Well, I want to talk about what would actually happen during the process, right? Things that we couldn't have possibly, foretold. Um, First was we got into crowdfunding. Again, it was hot at the time. Kickstarter was starting to become a thing. Indiegogo was starting to become a thing. Equity crowdfunding was becoming a thing, and so we had the momentum, right? Exciting. However, we found out, what was it, a year and a half into it, that this wasn't going to be that big of a thing. Little known fact, I don't think Kickstarter has grown in like 5 or 6 or 7 years. Or same with Indiegogo, right? Any of them, right? And we saw it before they peaked. Even when everybody was sweating those companies, and again, we weren't doing crowdfunding the way they were, but even within equity, it was even worse. And we looked around and we're like, you know what? There aren't that many people investing in these companies. There's a million companies that want to raise money, but if you look at the number of people that are willing to invest, it's just not that many. So here's what we did. We zoomed out and we said, what do we like about what we're doing right now? Okay, well, from the start, we still love working with founders. We love helping solve our problems. We're on the phone with them all day long, because it's a big part of how you do crowdfunding. You talk to the companies and kind of vet them, et cetera. And it turned out that was what the game changer was. It was just essentially our sales and consulting arm that changed everything for us, because they said, you know what? These founders, the ones that want to raise with us, they can't use our platform. They don't have a business plan. They don't have a pitch deck. They don't have, anything, any of this collateral. And that's when we said, oh shit, like we need to be solving all those problems too. And that was the genesis of startups.com, where we started to say, let's build a platform for the whole startup journey. And that was a hard right turn that we had no idea was in the cards a couple years prior. But we had to get in the game and get the momentum going.
Right. Without that, we never would have known the answers to all those questions around which parts of this are we actually enjoying, which parts of this do we excel at, which parts of this are the most valuable to the clients. Right.
Right.
There's no way to sit around and whiteboard your way into that. You cannot
Right.
do it. It's not possible. So we fortunately stuck around long enough. Took enough lumps that we sort of figured out which direction we need to move in, and then we did that, right? But it did not start out as the idea that you see now at startups.com, not even close, right? And even as we look back to those early kind of projection maps and things that we were thinking about iterating on, more than half of it never came to fruition because it didn't need to.
Ryan, I agree. But, when we think about where we stand with dumb ideas and kind of what they offer us, and it sounds silly to think this, but like they actually do have some redeeming qualities. One of those things is we're not married to it. And when we're not married to the idea, it fundamentally forces us to keep iterating on the idea. When we think it's a great idea, we hold on to it too tightly. When we think it's a dumb idea, we push away from it. We test more things. We try to figure out exactly where the good idea might be. And I think that's the value in starting with, what we're going to call dumb ideas. The value is being able to step back and saying, this idea needs to go through 100 iterations, maybe 1,000, before it becomes a great idea. And I'm going to keep pushing from now until then, until it becomes that great idea. And the whole team is going to get behind it. And that's how we actually find a great idea.
All right, so that was fun, but let's actually keep this conversation going. You've heard what we think about this, but Ryan and I would really like to hear what you think. And we're online like all day long, pretty much talking about every startup topic you could think of, from fundraising to customer acquisition to just really how to get all of this crazy startup stuff out of your head. And there's tons of other founders just like you. They're weighing in on these topics, so you'll get a chance to just hang out and meet some really smart founders. We're also super, super easy to find. You head over to groups.startups.com and let Ryan and I hear what's on your mind. Let's get to know each other a little bit, and let's just start having more of these conversations.